everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the International Fund for Animal Welfare, we are so grateful to have you in attendance for our 9th episode of our video blog series, Conversations on Conservation and Animal Welfare. Now, today's episode is actually very timely as we've seen a lot about this topic in mainstream news outlets in the United States. It is the crisis around big cats in captivity. Now, listen to this hard-hitting fact. There are more tigers in captivity in the United States than there are in the wild in the entire world. Yes, you heard that right. There are more tigers in the United States in captivity than there are wild in the rest of the world. Now, the majority of these big cats live in horrible situations with limited, if at all, any access to nutrition, to medical care, a good habitat, and that's if they even make it to adulthood. Not to mention, these big cats are apex predators, so there is a danger to the public. My name is Sabrina Foley, and I'm the Senior Global Marketing Manager for IFAW. I am honored to have with us today my colleagues and leading industry wildlife experts, Meredith Whitney and Carson Barylak. Hi, ladies.
Hey, Sabrina, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. And I know we have so much to talk about in today's episode. So before we get started, let's just have a brief introduction to both of you, and then we'll get down to all those really, truly crazy details about this topic.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Whitney. I'm a program officer in IFAW's Wildlife Rescue Program. That means that I provide project management to a global portfolio of wildlife rescue projects. And so I make sure that we're meeting project goals and we're achieving lasting impacts for wildlife. And occasionally, on good days, I also get to go out and help rescue wildlife.
Hey everyone, I'm Carson Barylak, and I'm a campaigns manager with IFAW's US policy team. I spend my days working with members of Congress, as well as partner NGOs, grassroots advocates, and other members of the public to reform, enact, and otherwise change federal laws to better protect wildlife, as well as the places they call home.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And I know both of you work quite often on the same issues, but really at different angles, so we can get that big impact that we need for the animals, people, and the place we call home. Now, some of our audience members may be somewhat familiar with our work with big cats in captivity. They may have received a mailing in the mail recently that may look like this, or maybe received some emails on this topic. But for those who aren't familiar with this type of work that we've been doing, can you give us some examples of what it is that you're doing in your day-to-day at IFAW and how directly that relates to the big cats in captivity crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So mostly I do Zoom meetings these days, just like a lot of other people, I think. So I talk to our partners on the ground. I talk to other stakeholders inside IFAW, and I read a lot of written reports to track the progress of the projects that we're engaged in, and to track also the progress of individual animals that are in rehabilitation, waiting to be released, or that have been rescued and are being rehabilitated. Under normal circumstances, I would also be visiting our projects and field sites to make sure everything's going smoothly and to be offering any technical guidance that's needed. Specifically for our big cat work, I work with the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance, which is an alliance of legitimate sanctuaries in the United States. And we work together to improve captive care, promote advocacy efforts, facilitate rescues whenever it's needed. So on any given day with them, I could be helping to write or edit a manual on captive big cat care. I could be assessing individual facilities to see if they really are true sanctuaries and not just posing as sanctuaries. Or I could be working with a team to develop protocols for coordinating big cat rescues or any other kinds of protocols. And lately, Carson and I have been working together to develop a campaign to change consumer behavior to reduce the number of people who want to visit facilities that allow cub petting?
Yeah, so I'm, as Meredith said, very fortunate to get to work with her on a number of projects. And really, I'm lucky to get to wear a whole range of hats in my role at IFAW. In addition to engaging policymakers and asking them to support animal-friendly laws, I do research to identify new policy priorities and advance existing priorities. I work with students who are interested in careers in conservation and really want to be the future of this field. And I get to build sort of diverse coalitions to advance wildlife policies, as well as behaviors that we can all engage in to better protect wildlife. That partnership building is probably one of the things I consider to be the most exciting, because I get to meet and work with so many interesting people. Not only do I get to meet so many conservationists and animal advocates, but because I advocate for the US Big Cat Public Safety Act, which would protect both animals and people, I get to work alongside first responders, emergency personnel, even doctors and people from the medical community, who are all standing together to say, we want to see, in addition to animals, we want to see our communities kept safe.
Thank you both. Thank you, Carson, for that. And Meredith, I think it's really great that not only do you get to work on specific project sites, but that you're actually working with legitimate sanctuaries to make sure that there's frequent communication. And they're so important, all those standards of care for these animals that people don't normally know how to handle in these situations. So, and it's just so critical, because I think a lot of people might think that once these animals have been rescued from these dire situations, that's it, happy ever after. But that's not really the case. I mean, these animals have been rescued from these dire situations and need a tremendous amount of care to make sure they have the proper nutrition, the proper medical care and facility to house them. So with that said, Carson, I know you're tremendously busy with policies and specifically the Big Cat Public Safety Act. Can you tell us a little more about that pursuit and why it's so critical that that bill gets passed into law?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for asking. It's critically important that we advance the US Big Cat Public Safety Act, which is a proposed federal law that would serve to rein in the trade in pet big cats, in pet tigers, lions, jaguars. And it's perhaps something that a lot of us don't think about often, but unfortunately, this is a very active and very dangerous trade here in the US. It would also help to bring an end to displays where exhibitors encourage people to come into direct contact with these animals. So you maybe have seen somebody post on social media a photo holding a tiger cub, or getting very close to a lion or another dangerous exotic animal. And again, this piece of legislation would not only serve to protect those animals who experience so much suffering in the course of being used for this purpose, but also people who are put in harm's way. And so thankfully, again, we get to work with these diverse, exciting coalitions, including the sanctuary partners that Meredith has mentioned, to help make this become law.
Thank you, Carson. By working to rein in the US trade in captive exotic felines by advancing that Big Cat Public Safety Act, the federal legislation that would end the private ownership of big cats, is just so important. Big cats and other exotic animals, they're just not pets, and people need to stop acting as such. If you want to show off, buy a fancy car, but not a fancy tiger. They belong in the wild. So this is actually a really great time to bring up the recent pet tiger that was roaming in the neighborhoods, I think, of Houston, Texas, just last month. And I feel like this has been happening a lot. We've been seeing this on the news more often than you would think would be a normal amount, if there isn't even a normal amount for this kind of thing to be happening. So Meredith, tell us how you coordinate with the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance and your work in situations like those.
Sure, Sabrina. And first off, I want to say you are right. This is happening a lot when it shouldn't be. So you were just talking about India, the tiger that was recently confiscated. But just before that, in March, just outside San Antonio, neighbors reported a bobcat, a juvenile bobcat on their, a young bobcat on the loose in their neighborhood. And when the first responders showed up and started investigating, they realized this was someone's pet. And it lived in a house also with a tiger cub that was being kept as a pet. And because they were in the city limits, it was illegal, just like India, the tiger, but outside the city limits in both of those situations would have been perfectly legal. And we talk about the importance of the Big Cat Public Safety Act. When Carson's talking about there's a patchwork of laws, this is what she's talking about. Is it depends on where you live, what you're allowed to have as a pet. And that's just a dangerous situation. So we at the BCSA have been working with first responders, with safety officers, with animal control officers, with any kind of law enforcement who might be responsible for confiscating animals, to really get the message across about where there are the safe places to put these animals so they don't end up contributing to the problem again. Because let's face it, this is not something that first responders are experts at, and it's something they shouldn't have to worry about. They should be protecting lives and not worrying about what the difference is between a sanctuary and a pseudo sanctuary. And then I've also, the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance also works together to try to help collaboratively make smart decisions about where confiscated or surrendered animals should be placed. So a great example of that is not that long ago, there was another tiger cub seized. And the agency that seized that animal contacted a local sanctuary, which happened to be a BCSA member. And they were trying to decide where they wanted to place the animal. Did they want to place it at the sanctuary? Did they want to place somewhere else? And this sanctuary actually said to them, they said, well, you know, we have space available, but we think it would be better if you placed at a different BCSA member, because they also have a tiger cub from a previous confiscation, and that tiger cub is being raised by itself. And it would be better for both cubs to be raised together. And that was just, to me, a really striking decision that they made that call for the animal, which is great. But I think one of the things that maybe people don't realize is that sanctuaries are reliant upon donor dollars. They're reliant upon their fundraising and grants that they get to sustain their operations and to be able to continue to rescue animals. And everybody knows that baby animals are really great for fundraising. That's why cub petting operations are so successful. So this member sanctuary actually gave up the ability to do that kind of fundraising, to do what was right for the animal. And I am just so proud to be working with individuals who care that much about animals, that they're willing to do that. Unfortunately, in this case, that tiger cub was not placed at our sanctuary. It was placed elsewhere. But we continued to work with that agency. We continued to talk with that agency and develop that relationship. And the next time they had a confiscated big cat, it did go to a member sanctuary. So we are making an impact. We are advancing things, which is really great.
That's so awesome to hear. Thank you, Meredith. And there's truly nothing I love more than like-minded people banding together for the sole purpose of benefiting these incredible animals. And it's such a great thing to have a network of accredited sanctuaries that work together for that primary goal of doing what's best for the animal first and foremost. And speaking of accredited sanctuaries, Meredith and Carson, can you tell us how to easily spot the difference between an accredited sanctuary and what some people call a roadside zoo? You might have also heard it called a pseudo sanctuary or roadside menagerie. People who aren't working in this type of field day in and day out hear terms like AZA, GFAS, BCQRS. Like, what do all these things mean? People want to do the right thing, but sometimes we use these acronyms that just, they don't know. So could you please go into that? Tell us a little bit about what those accreditations mean.
Sure. Yeah, it can be a little confusing. I think the best way to remember it is AZA, the Z stands for zoo, and in GFAS, the S stands for sanctuary. They're both accrediting bodies. AZA is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and they provide accreditation for zoological facilities throughout the Americas. And GFAS, the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, provides accreditation for rescue centers and sanctuaries throughout the world. They operate globally. And accreditation really just means that they're sending someone there to take a look around, to ask questions, to kind of snoop around. And and really assess the animal care that's being provided, whether or not the staffing is adequate, whether or not there's vet care, whether their financial situation is stable, so that when you go to those facilities or you pay, donate to a sanctuary or a rescue center, that you have peace of mind that someone else has done the legwork to know that they really are who they say they are.
That's a great point, Meredith. And to be honest, like, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? These places are known to not only market it in this beautiful place that's, heaven for all these animals, they also lie. So having these type of accreditations really takes the load off of the people to try to have the tools to make the right decisions. So Carson, can you give us some pointers on how to identify a true sanctuary? I know it's super tricky, so please tell us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so in addition to visiting the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries website and exploring which sanctuaries they've accredited, or visiting the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance website, there are a number of sort of red flags you can keep your eye out for when you're trying to identify whether a facility is a pseudo sanctuary or a true sanctuary. Because unfortunately, there are places, as you mentioned, out there that will call themselves a sanctuary, even though what they're really doing is exploiting animals for profit. So the one that is always the biggest red flag, in my view, is being allowed to touch animals. If you were allowed to hold a tiger cub and have your photo taken, to bottle feed a juvenile lion, to otherwise get very close to one of these large, dangerous felines, that is absolutely not a true sanctuary, and you should not do anything to support them or patronize their business. There also should be no breeding, no buying, selling, or otherwise engaging in commerce with the animals. A true sanctuary will be a lifetime home for that animal after it's been rescued. The animals aren't taken off site. They're basically not there to entertain you. There are true sanctuaries that you can go visit, but it's clear that the animals are not there for your entertainment. They're there to receive the compassion that they so richly deserve, and live out the rest of their lives without having to suffer.
Thank you for that, Carson and Meredith. It's been tremendously educational. Thank you both for going over that with us. And now that we know this is such a huge issue that we're working on multiple fronts to combat, what can our supporters watching right now do to help end this exploitation of animals, short of buying an exotic animal from eBay or Craigslist or any of those crazy websites, or participating in any cub handling? What can you tell our audience about what to do other than that? And can you talk a little bit about these experiences when the cubs are being handled and then photos are being taken? We're calling these unsafe selfies. And what's the difference between safe selfies and unsafe selfies?
Sure. I love this question. And I absolutely do have homework for our wonderful supporters who have done so much to help us protect animals. So I know this can sound like an unglamorous ask, and we're kind of always being asked to do this, but it really, really, really matters when you call your members of Congress. It's their job to listen to their constituents, and you should remember that they work for you. So please call your representative as well as your US senators and say, I support the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and I urge you to do the same. They care what they hear from constituents. That's the top thing that we hear when we're asking them. If 5 constituents called them that week, that means they're going to end up on board. So please take that action. And also you can take a pledge to make sure your consumer behavior is consistent with the well-being of captive big cats. You can go to our website and take the Safe Selfie Pledge to ensure that when you're photographing animals, that you're doing it safely and not putting them in harm's way or yourself in harm's way. So again, you should never, ever be handling a dangerous exotic animal. That's an automatic red flag. But you also want to be respectful of the animal space, and when it's in the wild, it's natural habitat as well. And so I think there's some tips up here that I think should be helpful guidelines, hopefully, but a good one to remember is just, you should never be touching the animal, disrupting its behaviors, or putting it into harm's way.
Thank you, Carson. And I'm really glad we're talking about safe selfies, because I have to admit, being passionate about working for animal welfare organizations, one of my most shameful moments was going on vacation to Mexico and swimming with the dolphins. Needless to say, there was an exorbitant amount of photos being taken. The dolphins were doing all sorts of tricks, and I was swimming with them. When I finally got enough courage to talk about this with others, I realized that others were doing the same thing, right? They had the same feelings. And now we know that that is not appropriate human-animal interaction. And now, with all that being said, I think it's really important for us to be transparent and inclusive when talking about these types of truly culture shifting efforts. Because once we have done something in the past, it doesn't mean we can't learn from it and make sure we do better next time. So for those of you who didn't know better and maybe partook in the same activities as I did with swimming with the dolphins or, cub petting at roadside animal menageries, now you know better. And now you can take that information, take action that will help support the animals, and share that wisdom with your friends and family. We're really all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. Sabrina, I love the quote from Maya Angelou that I'm probably going to get wrong that says, you do the best you can until you know better. And once you know better, you do better. And I think that's where a lot of us are at. We know better, we can do better. And forget about any mistakes that you may have made in the past. Although I will admit that it is a struggle. Every time you open up social media, you see celebrities with tigers and you see your friends on vacation petting a tiger cub. And guys, I want to pet a tiger cub. They're horrible, but I don't, because I know what goes into that picture. I know the cruelty that's behind that picture. And I want to talk a little bit about it, even though it is kind of a depressing topic. But exotic animals like lions and tigers that are used in cub petting exhibits or for photo props, they have a life of abuse to suffer through. They are pulled from their mothers when they are days, hours, or even minutes old. As soon as their eyes are opened, they are passed around from paid customer to paid customer to be bottle fed and held. And that sounds great. Who doesn't want to be bottle fed and held? But you guys know how much babies sleep. You know how much your cat at home likes to sleep. And think of it when it was a kitten. These tiger cubs and lion cubs are passed around for 8 hours, 10 hours a day without the opportunity to sleep. Oftentimes we find that the formula they're being fed is watered down, so they're hungry for the next paying customer. So they are not properly nourished, and they end up with some bone deformities and other illnesses as a result of that can be lethal. When they get too big to be used for cub petting anymore, they may end up in a pseudo sanctuary where they may or may not receive any kind of good care, or they may end up being sold to someone to be kept as a pet. And I think the majority of people who do that really have good intentions. They really like the animals, but they do not have the financial resources or the specialized knowledge that it takes to maintain these animals in a healthy manner. And again, it's the animal that ends up suffering. And the other thing that we unfortunately see is both the private individuals and the zoos will, in an attempt to render animals safe, which is foolish, will try to declaw or defang these cats. And of course, it doesn't make them safe. A 600-pound tiger, just because it doesn't have claws, still going to be able to hurt you. And the tragedy is that, veterinarians now do not recommend that any cat be declawed, including your cats at home. And so when you're talking about doing it with a tiger, you're talking about hundreds of pounds of weight on these feet, and the feet have been altered so that now the weight is distributed differently, which causes the joints to be in different positions. And so we see these cats often at very young ages with arthritis, lifelong arthritis as a result of these declawing procedures. And even worse, because most veterinarians will not perform these declawing or defanging procedures, it is done without a veterinarian. And there are a lot of really tragic complications that can arise from that as well. So without being more depressing about it, my call to action to you, all of our call to action to you, is to sign the pledge to take safe selfies and just say no to cub petting attractions.
Yeah, completely agree. Sabrina and Meredith, you're both totally right. This is not about feeling shame for past behavior. The truth is, a lot of the exhibitors that we're talking about that are encouraging this problematic behavior are taking advantage of consumers just as they're taking advantage of the animals. They tell lies about conservation benefits. They say that the animals are enjoying themselves. They say that they've been rescued from their parents. You know, they advance a lot of lies, and they really take advantage oftentimes of the very people, like many of us here, who love animals the most, and are, because of that, have this misguided desire to be that close to them. And so if you have unsafe selfies from the past, you know, take them down from social media. Tell people why you took them down, and encourage other people to commit to taking safe selfies only. I think actually, just to show that we're willing to own our past dicey choices with animals, and show that we're learning to change our behavior too. I think Sabrina has some photos to share. Is that right?
Yes, Carson, you're so right. And this is so personal for all of us. And we're hoping that by showing these, we can share with our audience today and everyone who's watching what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. I wish I knew this before I went on vacation to Mexico. So we're really putting this together for all of you out there as your quick know before you go tutorial. So Meredith, go ahead and take it away.
Right, so the picture in the red is the no situation. That elephant does not have any choice in this situation, doesn't have the opportunity to get away from the people or not comply. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of the training that goes into making an elephant do this kind of behavior is not humane training. It is very cruel. So if given the opportunity to touch wildlife, we'll say it again, don't do it. And definitely don't ride on them. On the right in the green, you'll see someone at a safe distance from a wild elephant, allowing it to do what it wants and not interrupting its natural behavior to take their selfie.
Yeah, this is another excellent example. Again, absolutely nobody should be handling, you know, captive big cat cubs. This is exactly what we're trying to put a stop to with the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And again, if you have a photo that's just like that one, you can make up for it. You know, call your member of Congress today and say, I'm not going to let this happen to any more cubs. Mm-hmm. And then on the right, you can see a positive behavior, that the animal is sort of distant in the background, isn't being disturbed or prevented from engaging in natural behaviors. And I would not recommend this as a rule of thumb for taking photos of people, but you know, you kind of want to be like spying on the animals. Like, it's best if they don't even know you're taking their photo because you're not disturbing them at all.
All right, you guys, I'm going to own it. This is actually part of a legitimate scientific study with legitimate actual animal welfare purposes. So the crocodile that I'm holding on the left is one that we had just finished collecting samples from. And instead of letting her go immediately, we stopped for just a few seconds to take photos. And we didn't need to do that. There's no need to do that. I think this is a trap that a lot of scientists even will fall into, and we need to learn to do better. So the photo on the right is, I believe, the same animal right after we had released her. And look, she paused and gave us time to take a picture. I'm sure that wasn't exactly what she had in mind. And then she scurried off and went back into the river where she belonged. And this is really the way the pictures, it doesn't look like it, but we are at a safe distance there. This is how it should be done.
And here is my shame. So on the left side, when the red is myself swimming with dolphins. Now, in this situation, not only am I petting and swimming with a dolphin, this dolphin was baited with food to perform these tricks. in a nonstop cycle. We were on a bus with many other tourists. So after I was done, it was the next tourist and the next tourist and the next tourist. And it was just obviously not appropriate. This is what we would call a completely unsafe selfie. Now to the right in the green is not me. I wish it was me, but this is a perfect example of a safe selfie. This is cohabitation, coexistence at its best. They're both existing without touching each other. If the dolphins want, they can swim away. There's no baiting with food of any kind. They're not in a restricted environment where they're forced to be with the other person. They're almost being spied on, as Carson said so eloquently before. That's really what we're going for. The animals shouldn't really know we're there. We shouldn't be interfering with their daily natural life. So with all that said, and all those great examples, and thank you so much for all of your amazing insight into this crisis and for informing us on what we can do to make a difference for these animals. And I hope everyone watching really learned a lot. It's now my favorite part of our episodes where we take questions from our audience. So audience, please be sure to type your question in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. And please let me know who the question is directed at. We have Carson and we have Meredith here. If you don't let me know, I will just pick for you and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can in the time allotted. Ready, set, go. See what we have. Okay, so the first question we have here is from Kelly, and Kelly is asking, can you guys explain why the cub petting industry and other exploiters of big cats are not supporting conservation in the wild like they boast? That's a great question, Kelly. Do either one of you want to answer? Which one? Meredith, you got it?
So a large part of what I do at IFAW is rehabilitation and release projects for wildlife. And I can tell you with absolute confidence that the animals that we're looking at in these captive situations in the United States, they're not releasable. Cannot be trained to be released in the wild. They would not be able to hunt their own food. They would be a serious threat to any humans in the area because they look at us and they think, oh, food, that's where food comes from. Right. So they're not being released. And then when you want to talk about, well, maybe their offspring, right? IFAW has been successful in rehabbing orphan tiger cubs in Russia and releasing them in the wild. Maybe we can release their offspring. Well, unfortunately, that's also not the case because there are 6 subspecies of tiger, and most of the captive tigers outside of AZA zoos are not any of those subspecies. They're hybrids, or they're maybe some Bengal tiger and some Amur tiger mixed together. And so even their offspring can never be released. We call them generic tigers because they're not a subspecies. And white tigers are not a species of tiger. They are just a color morph of a Bengal tiger, and they're horribly, horribly inbred, which results in a lot of serious health defects. And so also they have no conservation value whatsoever. They may be amazing cats, but not a conservation value.
Thank you for that, Meredith. So my next question here is from John, and John is asking, when we say big cats, what specifically are we talking about? Are we talking about just tigers and lions? Are we talking about someone's obese house cat? Great question.
That is a great question. No, we are not opposed to giving your house cats all the treats they want. The big cats we're talking about are really the largest, most dangerous ones, and most of them are imperiled in the wild as well. Lions, tigers, multiple leopards, jaguars, mountain lions, really the largest of the apex felid predators.
Thank you for that, Carson. So I have another question here from Mary, and Mary's, it's another one for you, Carson. How do we know which congressperson to contact? Which I think is a phenomenal question, Mary. Thank you.
That is an excellent question. So you can contact your members of Congress directly through IFAW's website. And the way that the system is structured, just based on your location, it'll know who your representative is. And that makes it really easy. And if you're just interested in knowing and learning more, you can go to house.gov and look up your members of Congress there as well.
Thank you, Carson. I knew you'd like that question.
Yes, yes,
Thank
I
you,
love that
Mary.
question.
So I have another question here. This is actually a great question from Debbie. Debbie's asking, she's from Canada, and she's asking, are there any stats on big cats in captivity in Canada? And I'd like to just branch off on that with worldwide. I know we've been talking a lot about the US, but do either of you have any details or anything about the big cat crisis worldwide? Meredith, Carson?
Meredith.
How many big cats are captive worldwide? I couldn't answer that question. I know that, we know where some of the problem areas are. South Africa is addressing this issue right now, thankfully, as they're outlining the lion breeding facilities. China still has tiger breeding farms that we love to get shut down. And maybe Carson actually could talk a little bit about how the situation in the US actually hurts us in getting that done. Carson?
Absolutely. And this actually ties into the earlier question about conservation as well. So the short answer is we don't know how many tigers are in captivity in the world, in part because we lack the laws that we would need here to know how many we have and to know where they are. That really gets to the crux of the issue. We do know that when we try to positively impact tiger conservation around the world, when we get into international negotiations and urge countries to better protect their wild populations, or especially urge countries that engage in tiger farming to stop doing that because it reinforces demand for those imperiled animals, parts, and products, they essentially look at us and say, clean up your side of the street. We have no credibility on this issue when we're urging others to protect tigers, when we're allowing them to be bred, inbred, constantly traded without regulation, and really be abused all across the US.
Such a great point. Thank you, Carson. We really need to get our act together first before we start looking elsewhere. And honestly, that's true for a lot of things. So thanks for bringing that up. I have another question here from Laurel. This is for Meredith. Can you explain why hybrids are allowed to be bred like Joe Exotic did? And what are long-term effects of interbreeding hybrids? Thanks, Laurel, for that question.
Yeah, there's no law against it. The US legal system views animals as property in most cases. And you can do what you want with your personal property. Carson may want to elaborate more on that when I'm done. I'm not the lawyer here, Carson is. But the health effects can be terrible. So, without going into things about growth regulating hormones, there are reasons why these hybrids get to be huge, and they just keep growing throughout their lives and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's hard on their organs. It's hard on most of their bodily systems. It's hard on their skeletal system because, that's not built to support all that weight. They tend to have shortened lifespans. And frankly, they can be really unsafe. These animals, you talk about facilities that keep tigers and suddenly they have a liger, which is huge. And maybe it can get out. Maybe that enclosure is not strong enough to keep that animal in, which is a pretty scary thought. So those are just some of the problems. And then of course, when you talk about the white tigers, I already mentioned that they're just horribly inbred and have a host of medical problems as a result.
Yeah, Meredith, you're exactly right. It causes so much suffering. And you guys probably know by now, I'll take any chance to urge you to support the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which would cover hybrid species as well.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you for that, Carson. And I have a follow-up question here from an anonymous attendee for Meredith. It's addressing, you say that white tigers have no conservation value. What exactly does that mean?
Sure. So white tigers, well, They can occur naturally. It is incredibly rare. The last time one was seen in the wild was the 1950s. It was actually shot and killed by hunters. White tigers in the wild, they lack the camouflage that keeps them safe from predators when they're young. Well, animal predators when they're young and human predators when they're old. And we want to take them for hunting trophies, which is what happened to the last one that was spotted in the wild. And then when you talk about captive white tigers, almost all or maybe all of the white tigers in the United States are descendants of a single male tiger that was gifted to the United States in the I'm not going to guess at the date. I can't remember the date anymore. And so that tiger was bred to her uncle and then back to her son. And then that son was bred with another offspring from that breeding because it's a recessive gene. And the only way you can get white tigers is to keep breeding back along that family tree. And that's why you get horrible vision issues. You get a lot of facial deformities. You get low birth numbers, so like low litter numbers, and then you have very poor infant survival from those litters too. And really highly inbred animals, you can have like 80% of the litter not survive after birth.
Thank you, Meredith, for that. That was a great question. I have another one here from Debbie, and Debbie is saying, how many states, I think this is a great question, it might be for Carson, how many states allow exotic cats as pets?
So that's an excellent question. There's a whole patchwork. So there are still a few states that have no regulations, where it's a free-for-all. Like Meredith said, a municipality could maybe make a rule, but the state itself does nothing to stop people from preventing the trade in pets of these species. Some states have permit systems that for the most part are relatively easy to, where it's relatively easy to get permits. And there are a few states that have done better than others that have really gotten stricter about the way these animals can be cared for. New York State, for example, has a restriction on direct contact with big cats, which is really fantastic. But the bottom line, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but every state's a little bit different. And the bottom line is that this is such a fundamentally transboundary trade that while it's important for states to take action, and we applaud every municipal ordinance and every state law that goes into effect to help safeguard animals, we aren't going to be able to solve this problem without federal law, the Big Cat Public Safety Act.
Yes, love that. It really does need to be a federal effort. So we're coming up on the time, and I know we could talk about this forever. We should just have a midnight series where we just go on and on and on. But
like a happy hour.
So I have, I'm going to take two more questions here that I think are really great. The first one for Meredith. Can you give us the accredited big cat sanctuaries in the US, or how would somebody find a list of accredited sanctuaries?
Yeah, you would go to the GFAS website, the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, go to their website. They actually have a great finder tool where you can find accredited facilities worldwide. So even if you're going on vacation and you want to find someplace, that's the place to find it. If you're looking specifically for big cat places, you can go to the Big Cat Sanctuary Alliance website. Now, some BCSA members are not accredited because we all know that you can still be a good facility and not have gotten your accreditation yet for a variety of reasons. But you can see a list of all of our members there, and all of our members are true sanctuaries in that they do not buy, sell, breed, use animals for commercial purposes, and they do not allow contact with the animals.
Thank you for that, Meredith. And I think this is a good question on top of that, which I actually want to know too. How, and this is for either of you, so just raise your hand on who wants to answer, but how would you go about reporting one of these roadside zoos that are doing the things we just talked about they shouldn't be doing? What is someone supposed to do when they see that, acknowledge it, don't partake, and then what's the next step?
That's an excellent question. You know, enforcement of restrictions on poor treatment of animals is just, they're just not enforced in the way that we frankly wish they would be. I think in most cases, the best thing to do is probably to, of course, avoid patronizing that business, encourage all your friends to do the same, indicate the circumstances that you observe there on TripAdvisor, which is among the private companies that have started to take action and say, we don't want to be contributing to this kind of abuse. The US Department of Agriculture is responsible for overseeing the operations and licensing exhibitors of exotic animals, but I defer to Meredith on whether it's...
The USDA does have a tool on their website where you can report potential violations, and I recommend you do it. They do read the reports. They do send inspectors periodically. They just don't have the staff and the resourcing to do inspections as often as they need to. But create that paper trail, and, you know, hopefully if it gets long enough and there are enough violations, maybe they'll be fined. Yeah, unfortunately, USDA is not a great tool, but it is still worth creating that paper trail.
And what do you both think about just doing reviews on Yelp or Google? Do those things help as well as talking about paper trail, just putting it out there that, hey, I noticed this, it's not okay, so other people can read it?
Yes, 100%. It makes such a huge difference for people to understand that others who have visited there, you know, that they found the circumstances to be unsafe and inhumane. And it's kind of like, you know, if you have your unsafe selfie up, then take it down and tell people why you did it. Same thing with having visited one of these inhumane facilities. Say, I didn't know before I went, but I want everybody else to know, to ensure that moving forward, we can all work together to safeguard big cats.
Thank you. Thank you, Carson. Thank you, Meredith. And that's unfortunately all the questions we have time for today. So everyone who's watching today, please don't forget to check out our website, IFAW.org, for all the updates on these types of projects, updates on the Big Cat Public Safety Act, etc. Meredith and Carson, thank you so much for joining us for the latest episode. I'm actually going to be leaving you all with our brand new TV public service announcement. So stay tuned right after we sign off here. It's just a minute. We'd love for you to watch it. And I'm so looking forward to seeing all of you plus more on September 15th for episode 10. Thank you, ladies, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
When the world's endangered animals need help most, when their lives are at greatest risk, when they would otherwise be lost, the International Fund for Animal Welfare is there, taking action to rescue the animals we love, to protect them and their threatened natural habitats. But the danger to animals the world over is growing, and the need for your help has never been more urgent. On land, you'll help stop poachers from threatening and killing elephants and big cats for the illegal wildlife trade. In the oceans, you'll help rescue dolphins, whales, and seals from deadly hazards. And you'll help rescue, rehabilitate, and release vulnerable animals when disasters strike. Here at home and around the world, we can't do this work without you. See how you can help animals and people thrive together at joinifaw.org.